I'm Clark Durant. I don't wear a leather jacket or ride a Harley. But challenging the status quo, you bet I'm a rebel. When Detroit schools were struggling, I co-founded Cornerstone, where 95% of our students graduate from high school. When a state railroad went bankrupt, I took it private, saving jobs and taxpayer money. Washington is broken and isn't accountable. Career politicians won't change things, but this Michigan rebel will. I'm Clark Durant, and I approve this message.
Let's give a warm welcome for U.S. Senate candidate Clark Durant.
I invite everybody back to their seats and to, Paul has made sleeping bags available just outside the door, and it'll be fun to spend the night at the gym with all of them. Paul said that Gary and I had 4.5 hours, so thank you very much for that opportunity. And yes, there will be a final exam at the end of the evening, or maybe I should say in the morning. My name is Clark Durant. I am a rebel with a cause, and it's interesting how that commercial got developed. When we were interviewing a number of different firms that wanted to represent us in creating our media for this U.S. Senate campaign, one of the firms spent some time researching my life, talking to a variety of people, and when they were making their presentation at our home, they had the storyboards of an ad with me with a motorcycle, like James Dean, although I'm with a cause and he was without a cause, and then riding off to Washington on this motorcycle. And I looked at these guys and I said, you know, I don't think that's me. I said, I'm a button-down guy, you know, I've been a conservative all my life. I was a 23-year-old vice president at Hillsdale College, and I don't own a leather jacket, and I don't ride a Harley. And the guy said, that's it. He said, that's it. Because in all the things that I have done over the 40 years of my life, I have challenged the status quo. I have challenged some of the most powerful organizations in America and was given that opportunity by the greatest president in our lifetime, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, I first met him in 1970. I love, by the way, I'm really grateful for these video reminders of the man that I served. It wasn't that I just heard him speak when I was in high school or went to an opportunity. I got to know the man, and I was asked to head up an agency for him. Now, to let you know how important that request was, the agency that I was asked to head up was so important to the left that my predecessor was a woman that many of you probably know, and her name was Hillary Rodham. And under Carter, the Legal Services Corporation had run amok. And, you know, when you start giving millions of dollars to radical lawyers, they can do a lot of damage. And the Attorney General under President Reagan in his first term was a man named William French Smith. And the Attorney General asked me, on behalf of the President, to head up this agency. The President had tried to get 2 other individuals confirmed by the Senate without success. And as I say, the President and I had first met in 1970. I headed up an office for him in 1976 when we opened up the headquarters in Michigan, frankly, in the Michigan primary. And I was asked to take this on. And when I was confirmed by the United States Senate, the Attorney General said, we need somebody who has the conviction and the courage to take on the vested interest in the Legal Services Corporation. I not only took on the spending culture in Washington, in fact, after testifying once in front of the Senate Appropriations Committee, I sent my government affairs person up to the Hill to lobby the next couple of days later, and he bumped into a senator in the hall, and that senator pointed his finger at my government affairs person and said, you go back and tell Clark Durant to shut up and spend the money like everybody else. And that was a Republican. It was Ted Stevens from Alaska. The problems facing our country have been created, frankly, and we must be candid about this, by both Republicans and Democrats. And it's not just been over this last election, it's been over the last 15 to 30 years. And our Republican representatives and our Democratic members of the Senate and the House have voted time and time and time again to burden our children and our grandchildren with debt beyond limit, debt beyond responsibility. You know, you've heard all these numbers being tossed around about how great is this debt. Just the unfunded liabilities of Medicare and Social Security total over $100 trillion. What is that number? That number is larger than all the equity in every company on the New York Stock Exchange and every home in America. You can't run a business, you can't run a family, and you certainly can't run a country with that kind of irresponsibility. And there isn't a company, a small businessman or woman, there isn't a not-for-profit that would keep people in office or in responsibility or in positions of power acting in such a fashion. But I often say to audiences that Debbie Stabenow is our United States Senator because of us. She is there because we didn't do our work. Carl Levin is there because we didn't do our work. Knocking on every door, making phone calls, showing up at victory centers, getting on the phone, raising money, giving money. And now it has come to a point where our treasure as Americans is being depleted. And I'm not just talking about the federal treasury, because that was depleted long ago. Our treasure. Our treasure. And if we don't send people down to Washington willing to challenge the status quo and to be a rebel, there's no hope then for our country. I hate to say that. This is a great country. I remember sitting in Constitutional Hall as one of the President's Senate-confirmed appointees, and he had recently come back from Pontotoc in Normandy. And he talked about the boys of Pontotoc. But he talked about America, and that even though on the soil of the French, these boys died for America and what America stands for, and they died to make the world free. We have in this election probably one last chance to restore constitutionally limited government. That's it. You know, many people were saying that this fight, for example, that HHS and Kathleen Sevilla is going after the Catholic Church, which is a violation of the freedom of religion, violation of the First Amendment rights, and people think it's a Catholic fight. People think it's a Catholic fight. I give great credit to Mike Huckabee, who on, I think it was Good Morning America, said we are all Catholic now. We're all Catholic now. We have a government that is slowly eating away the substance of our private sector, of our private communities. When de Tocqueville wrote this wonderful treatise on democracy in America, the thing that he said was the lifeblood of this country was the voluntary associations and all the work that is done by people who come together to serve others and to help others and to love others, even our enemies. And this government over a period of time is growing to such an extent it is crushing the very lifeblood of that vitality. I was over in Newberry earlier this morning and talking to some of the people who had come together as volunteers to help with the fire, you know, and helping all of those who lost their homes or had to evacuate in one way or another. It was so touching. I said to my daughter, Maggie, we've got to film this. We've got to just hear these hearts, because this is the lifeblood of America. This is the lifeblood of America. I was sitting quietly at home and was not thinking of running for the United States Senate. I have a wonderful wife. Susan and I have been married for 39 years. We have 4 children. We were going to travel. I love Winston Churchill. We were going to England this past fall because to Chartwell and to visit with some Churchill scholars. And I do my work in the inner city. 20 years ago, I started the Cornerstone Schools. Let me tell you very briefly about those schools because they're even important in this race. These schools in a city, and many of you, I don't know when the last time you were in Detroit, but in a city where only maybe 25% of the kids graduate from high school, where When we started Cornerstone 20 years ago, I can tell you today, for 20 years, 95% of our children who come to Cornerstone have graduated from high school. They've gone on, whether to college or into the workplace, to be good women and young men of good character. We did it without government money. We demonstrated that there was an American way, even in the most difficult of circumstances, to solve problems. We didn't need the government to come along and give us a loan, a grant, or an earmark. What we did was we depended on the love that God puts in every human heart. I had Democrats, I had Republicans, I had independents, I had people who I know didn't agree with me philosophically, but they came. And you see what's missing in Washington is simply this. If you go back and read the Federalist 10, Madison's Federalist 10, he talks about the faction. You know, one of the things I'm grateful about running this time, although as I say, I hadn't thought about doing it, and I'll tell you why in just a second. But I began to reread some of the Federalist papers, some that I used to teach when I taught a great books course and courses at Notre Dame while I was in law school. But in Federalist 10, Madison talks about factions. And he talks about how it's human nature that people are going to fight about this stuff. So what did our founders do? They diffused power and dispersed it. What we have allowed to happen really since the Roosevelt era is this slow concentration of power that is accumulating. And now what people, you see the veracity with which people fight to preserve this power and this money. The answer must be to send people down to Washington who will work frankly, in both parties. In both parties, we have to get this message out. We have to be restoring constitutionally limited government, restoring to the states and to the people the power that our founders originally intended. Ronald Reagan was right again. America truly is a shining city on a hill, but he's also right that it is the last best hope of mankind on the face of the planet. And when 2 generations hence look back at us, what will they say? What did we do to save this wonderful republic? So I'm sitting quietly at home, not frankly thinking of running for the U.S. Senate. I'm trying to do this work in the city for these children. We have over 1,600 children at our schools. And I get a call from Betsy DeVos. I get a call from Spence Abraham. My friend Gary Glenn, Pete Hoekstra, Judge Randy Heckman, we're all in the race. And Betsy said, Clark, we have to beat Debbie Stabenow. You're the only person who can beat Debbie Stabenow. You need to get into this race. I said, Betsy, I don't want to do this. Spence Abraham called. Said, Clark, you've got to get in. We have to beat Debbie. With your work in the city, with your ability to raise money, with the life that you've lived that is so different than her just perpetual promotion of big government, you will offer people a clear choice. You will have the ability to penetrate and get votes in her territory. I have blue-collar men and women whose jobs I saved on that railroad. And I already have the film and camera that they're going to cut commercials for me, and they're Democrats. I'm Debbie Stabenow's worst nightmare. But we must think as we build that this is not just about defeating Debbie Stabenow. If this was just about replacing a Democrat with a Republican, I wouldn't be running. I feel that our country is at a time when we are in the midst of the debate about what direction we're going in. Whether we're going to restore freedom and family and appreciation of life from the moment of conception till natural death, to appreciate the value of every human being. Or are we going to go this way of this entitlement, entanglement state that's going to make Europe look like a plaything? If we go down, the world goes down. The world goes dark. We must maintain strength. Reagan was right. My father was a captain in World War II. I was a captain in the Army because I loved my country, but I also admired my father. And when I went to Tulane University, I signed up for ROTC when most people bailed because they had a high draft number, and I did too. I stayed and went on to become a captain in the United States Army. I was a 23-year-old vice president of Hillsdale College. Larry Arnn, who's the president of Hillsdale, has endorsed me in this race simply saying this: these are unusual times that call for unusual people. Clark is uniquely equipped for the constitutional challenges that face our country. But it isn't me. It's all of us. This cannot happen. You know, if you think about it, Paul's and everybody here at Schoolcraft, there's probably, I don't know, there's probably been 60 people in the room. 70, 80, I don't know what the number is. But you know what it really is? If it's 70 people, it's 7,000. Because every one of us must go and find 99 others. I don't care whether they're in the UP or down below the bridge. Every person in this room must leave this room tonight saying that we will begin between now and August and now in November to find 99 other people, whether they be young people, whether they be retired people, whether they be working small businessmen and women. I make one major promise to you. I am a rebel. I am a rebel with a cause that's our cause. When I took on the American Bar Association, the most powerful lobby in America, how powerful is it? Because we never hear about it very much. Do you know that the American Bar Association has insinuated itself into the selection of federal judges, that every federal judge has to meet the muster of the ABA approval system? That's a lot of power. And when I was a young lawyer and I was heading up this agency for President Reagan, and I was asked to speak in New Orleans to the past presidents of the American Bar Association, and I could have gone there, I had a young family, I had a young practice. I knew that if I spoke truth to power, I'd be crushed. But I also knew that this organization stood in the way of poor people having access to justice. So in front of this group, sitting in and writing my remarks over the last couple of days, I've been cutting sugar cane with migrants in Belgrade, Florida. And I wrote a talk, and I went in front of this audience, and I said that the greatest barrier to justice is the monopoly of the legal profession. That it denies access to people who seek access to fair disputes and to the resolution of their disputes. And I went, as a former teacher, and I went through all of what that meant. I thought we'd have a nice conversation. Polite applause, no questions, maybe one or two. I got on a plane, headed back. I was one of Jack Kemp's 4 national co-chairs when Jack was running for president. I had to get back to Michigan to do some work. No sooner had I landed, I'd gotten back to the office, and the phone was ringing off of Washington was calling. What did you say? I said, why, what happened? The president of the American Bar Association had held an impromptu press conference after I spoke, and said Clark Durant should resign from his position. He's a disgrace to the position, and I'm laughing at myself, frankly, because I had gone into the belly of the beast and spoke the truth. And all hell broke loose, because shortly thereafter, Bob Kastenmeier, who was a minority member, was the ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee, held a press conference with one of the members and said that I had misused funds. This is what they do to you in Washington if you start disagreeing with them. They try to personally destroy you. And I went to my old friend Henry Pye, a great American. And I said, Henry, why are they doing this to me? And he said, Clark, because you've been affected. And they want you off the playing field. Karl Rove told me for this race, he said, if you win your primary, the left is coming after you because they don't want you back in Washington. Because they know what you can do. They know that you can challenge the status quo like few others. I say simply this to you. If you honor me to be your United States Senator, know it will work harder with more relationships to not only restore our government to its constitutionally limited form, to allow people to keep more of what they earn, to reduce regulations, to reduce agencies, all these things that need to be done. But I will do it in a way I hope that will honor you and the real joy that is America, that will unleash the creative energies of every American person to restore American greatness as it should be. And even if America is the only country on the face of the planet that sees in every person the dignity of God, the freedom to be all that God intended, and to produce great wealth and great value for others, so let it be. Let me close with this. I am uniquely positioned to beat Debbie Stafford. Not only do I offer a clear choice between her life, her votes, and mine, but unlike any other Republican candidate in the primary, I have relationships with Democrats in these cities. They've already written me checks. They've signed my petition. They've said that they will publicly endorse me if I win the nomination. There's no one else with those relationships. It's one thing to go into a black church and talk about the defense of marriage. The black church is fully in favor of the defense of marriage. But when you spend 20 years of your life helping these children who the world had written off to be successful, when you help these children to be excellent every day, there's gratitude and a willingness, even though President Obama, when these people come forward, President Obama will try to, I'm sure, have a word with them, to put that mildly. But they will stand strong. Debbie doesn't know it, except it's now on tape. That's okay. Because I'm proud of these friendships. But the other piece is money. Debbie has over $7 million in her account right now. Only Pete Hoekstra and I have raised more than $2 million. I have saved the taxpayers close to $100 million just in our schools since they were founded. With Arnold Palmer and some others, we raised $8 million to help these kids in the city. There are a number of people who will come, if I'm the nominee for the Republican Party, a number of people who will come and help us to beat Debbie Stafford. And it will take millions. Just trust me, it will take millions. Because Bobby Shostak is exactly right. If Michigan is threatened, all hell's going to break loose on the Democratic side. I'm just telling you. And the guy that's standing before you right now, they'll do everything they can to rip and tear and rip me apart. Because for them, politics is everything. For us, it is simply a means in order to restore freedom and constitutionally limited government. And with your prayers and with your hard work, we can beat it. God bless you all. Thank you.